people are being taxed unnecessarily. And I don't believe that there would be a change in terms of the outcome of the budget process if it went back to the General Assembly.
Are you going to run for governor? Give me an answer.
Am I going to run for governor?
Answer. I want to break the news.
There's no news to break. Whatever decision I make will be based on what I think could be effective and good for myself and the people of Rhode Island.
Where do you stand with the schools? You want them back? You're not getting them back on your timetable.
Yeah, the city of Providence this year had a bill to return the schools this summer. That bill did not pass. The Commissioner of Education has authority from the K-12 Board of Education. This is a state board of education. To keep the schools up to 2027. So it will be no later than 2027, but it could be earlier.
Holding the powerful accountable from Washington, D.C. to right here in southern New England. This is 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti.
Well, we try every week to do that, not how successful we are, but we do try to hold them accountable. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gene Valicenti. This is 10 News Conference. Well, it's the middle of the year, right? We're in July already, so this is a great time to have our reporter Roundtable convene again. Allison Bologna is with us. Brian Crandall, Abby Buttacavoli, you're a newcomer to the table.
I am.
Welcome.
First time. Excited to
Welcome.
be here.
You're going to talk about schools. You're going to talk about Pawtucket. But first, let's get to the budget. Brian, the governor told me, I'm not going to sign it because I got some stuff I like, a lot I didn't. But that's as far as my protest goes. Why not veto it?
Right, and that was the big question. He basically convened a press event last week to say how disappointed he was in the budget. I don't like the added gas tax, added cost for health care insurance. And he said, I'm not going to sign it, but I'm also not going to veto it. I'm not going to make lawmakers come back in and override me. And that was a lot of the questions he then got. Well, why not go all the way and prove a point here? And he, as you heard there, said, well, I don't think it's actually going to change anything. It wouldn't change the bottom result, but he kind of middled it on that.
Speaker Sicarci told me that, the governor gave me a budget that was shortchanged anyway. And he handed me this budget knowing that I'd have to do the heavy lifting and spend more money.
Well, right, there was a couple items in there, like taxing online advertisements for big, like Google and Facebook and stuff like that. And also condensing the prison. That didn't go anywhere. So there was this talk from the House side that there were some things in there that weren't going to work from the jump, and then we had to fix it up.
Sicarci said every mayor called me and said, I need more money, and I got them the money, and the governor knew that he was giving me something short, and he said, I'll take the heat for it. There's money for the schools.
Oh, yeah.
There's money for Providence schools, and the state still controls them.
Yes.
And Mayor Smiley still wants them back, but he's not getting them back.
Yeah, I sat down with Mayor Smiley not too long ago and the Education Commissioner, and both are at odds about when that should happen. Mayor Smiley says now the goal is going to be next summer. So the goal originally this July, which we now know we are in, and that is not happening.
Can I ask, why does he want them back so badly?
Yeah, I think
like strategically, how's
the community wants it, is what he says.
Right,
the community feels like Providence knows their schools best,
and the state didn't do a good job. So.
And they have seen what the state maybe has done with other districts, and they are not so pleased.
Well, listen, he's on the hook for $15 million. He's raising taxes because he owes the school district, which is run by the state, $15 million. So I guess if he says, well, I'm going to stick my neck out
let me make the
to raise taxes,
if you're going to pay for it, you might as well get it.
That's fair.
And it's going to happen.
Right.
It is going to happen. AIG and Helica Infante Green, the education commissioner, does say that schools will be returned. She just needs to be sure that that is going to happen successfully.
But it could be 2 years from now, right? Wasn't it 2027? Mayor Smiley at the beginning of this year said, like right now, July of this year, and maybe that was a negotiating, maybe we can get it in the middle, 2026. So now he's trying for that, but
we'll see.
Let's just review. The city owns the buildings, controls the actual physical plan.
Yep.
But the state is calling the shots.
Yes.
What kids learn, who gets to teach, everything is the state.
Yeah.
And Mayor Smiley, there's bad blood between him and the education commissioner.
It didn't start out that way. She was a Gina pick, but it's really disintegrated over the years.
It has. She took him to court.
Yeah.
And they both do say they get along and they meet regularly. They say that this is not.
They're going to say that.
Right.
Yep.
The public scuffles we see are not necessarily what's reality, but so a lot to look forward to.
I get the sense that the mayor's just fed up. He wants to roll up his sleeves and clean it up on his terms. If he's going to be paying for it, put him in charge, right?
And he says there's a lot of overlap. The HR department for the city and the HR department for the school is that waste. And that's a question.
Look, the state took it off the mayor's hands, whoever that mayor's going to be. Another mayor might say, keep him as long as you want. You know, it's
Well,
your,
that's what
it's
I'm
your
saying.
problem
It's
now.
Right.
Well, we've seen
Right, you can always
Central,
blame somebody for the poor test scores
Yeah.
if it's not you.
Central Falls has been under state control for 30 years. And that has been something that I think Providence compares himself to.
Central Falls has been under state control for 30
30 years.
years.
30
Yeah,
years.
Providence
schools.
is 6 now, right?
6.
Yeah, about 6. About to be.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, and Central
is.
Falls has made gains, but a lot of people argue 30 years is a long time to not be where they
Right. And in the
should be.
meantime, a lot of charter schools have opened up in the Blackstone Valley. So.
Well, these charters, yeah.
There's a push for charter.
There's a list to get into them,
Yeah.
right? You can't get your kid
Some
into
of
a charter
them, yeah,
school.
some of them are, you have to live in Central Falls to go.
Yeah.
But then, like Legacy High School, which is a branch off of Segway, which is based in Central Falls, it's opened up to Providence, Pawtucket, Woonsocket, and that's interesting because the model with that school is it's high schooler kids who want to be teachers or educators
Yeah.
in some way in the future. They just bought a building in Pawtucket, so they're expanding.
Before we leave the schools, you know, the new Senate president is Valerie Lawson, the president
Yes.
of the big teachers union. And she got an advisory opinion from the Ethics Commission saying you could hold both jobs. You could be president, so to
And that
speak.
was after when she was sworn, the day she was sworn in, she said, no, I'm not leaving the teachers union, NEARI. I don't have to do that. We're a part-time legislature. Just about everybody has another job, so everybody has
Everybody has a
conflicts.
conflict of
And
interest.
she's been able to kind of work around it, but she has recused herself
Yeah.
from certain matters. And then more recently, she went to the Ethics Commission and asked for an opinion. And I guess unsurprisingly, they said, no, it is not a conflict to hold both, and you can go
Yep.
case by case. I
Well, listen,
tried
it's
to
a good
ask her,
paying
like,
job.
I tried to ask her, like, what if they said it was a conflict? What would you have done?
Listen, she comes out of the unions, and there's union legislation every day crossing her desk, from supermarket cashiers to everything.
And
involves
Dominic Ruggiero, who
Same.
she succeeded,
Same.
he resigned his union position. Now,
Right.
whether it's in your blood or not,
He
you
came-
can always make that argument.
he
that
came
you can
out-
resign, but if you've been doing that work for years and years, you're still going to have, you still have opinions.
He came out of the laborers union just before we leave the schools. The scores aren't where we want them to be. I know everybody, and, they bump up a point. Everybody, it's
Yes.
great. And the governor says, well, more people are going to school.
Right.
Attendance is up. You can take the last word on this.
Well, of course, and there's a lot of initiatives. Attendance matters, and math matters now in Rhode Island this year, and the scores are improving and things are changing, but a lot of people would argue not the way they should be. Everyone's got to be in competition with Massachusetts. That is something that the Education Commissioner has been very vocal with me about, that the scores are getting there, and they're making bigger gains
Well, they
than
can only
Mass
go
is.
up.
That's true. And by the way, Massachusetts is a little soft lately with certain categories.
Well,
Well,
MCAS
and
is no longer a requirement.
Right, they put
Right.
it on the
Yeah.
ballot,
Right.
and the voters decided that MCAS won't be a graduation requirement. It's still there, so you can measure it, but you don't need it to graduate like you did before.
We all
Yeah.
chuckled over the governor's 2030 plan. Oh, we're going to meet or beat Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Listen, the way they're going, maybe we will.
Yeah.
All right.
So them going down means us meeting halfway.
Could be. Compromise. That's politics. Stay with us. We'll be right back to talk about the bridge and the assault weapons ban and the homeless protesting outside Mayor Smiley's house.
Thank you for turning to 10, your news leader. 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti continues right now.
We are here today to watch the governor sign, as he indicated, probably one of the most transformative, monumental gun safety bills in the state.
All right, that was the governor signing the assault weapons ban. Now, it was watered down. Originally, they were going after possession. They wanted you to register it. The final bill was you can't buy or make an assault weapons ban in Rhode Island. Still has some teeth, Brian. And this was a fight they fight every year, and they're going to come back next year.
Right, and again, as we've seen in Rhode Island with some of these bigger fights, it takes a long time and it goes step by step. And as you said, not everyone was happy. There were gun control groups that came out against this compromise bill in the Senate, and then there was another one that was for it. And in the end, the people Governor McKee, who pushed for it and wanted it in the budget originally this year, I think they said, well, something is better than nothing. We've got to go part of the way, as they've done with, the magazine, the large capacity magazine restrictions, and they go step by step down the road.
Now, it's gun rights.
Now-
It's always a testy issue. Gun rights.
This is the furthest it's ever gotten, though, in the state. And Senator DePalma, who we just heard from in that soundbite, pushed for it. But he's going to also tell you, compromise. There's going to have to be some compromise to get it at least passed to this level before it can keep getting amended in the
Here's
future.
how they work. Compromise. We'll get this year.
Right.
You can't
You
make
gotta get
one
your
or
foot in the
buy
door.
one. Next year they'll come back and they'll go for possession or a registry. And squeaky wheel gets
That's
the wheel.
right.
That's the way politics
and
works.
we've seen a lot of people on both sides of the aisle be very vocal about what this has meant for them, and people speaking, I'm worried about my children going to school.
Yeah.
And in the state of Rhode Island, making sure everyone's safe has been a priority, I know, of Governor McKee.
All right, listen, here's another testy topic, truck tolls.
I was just going to go there. They're not going to tax the cars, right? Once you get in, and they're not right now. They're not right now.
Well, they could always change the law to allow
Right.
for that,
That's
and some
what I'm
people
saying. You
don't
never
believe
know.
it that they're not going to tax.
Well, at this point, they got to
tax the
figure out a
cars.
way to turn the tolls back on.
They're supposed to be going
because
back on.
that's a sticky wicket. 'Cause going back to the budget, and I did a story on this. The budget includes $10 million in anticipated revenue from the truck tolls for this budget year. That, if you work that out, that's for the last quarter of the year, starting sometime in the spring of 2026 through this time next year. So it's not as easy as turning them on. There's the technical issue because they've been off so long, but as the lawsuit that the state, I guess, they claim they won to be able to turn them back on. The trucking industry also claims they won because a cap that was put in place by the state to help out local truckers in terms of they could only pay so much per day. That was ruled unconstitutional because it favored one group over another. So now the question logistically is, how do we turn the tolls back on, appease local truckers, so they're not, they're going back and forth 10 times, but then not have an unconstitutional problem again?
Here's the fix. They're going to charge every truck a very low toll. The governor has already indicated that. However, the guy who runs Job Lot says, I run hundreds of trucks in and out of Rhode
gonna be
Island.
So low
expensive.
toll.
They're taxed every time they come in and every time they leave.
And the trucking industry will say, okay, you can lower it for everybody, but local trucks, so both local businesses and trucks that stop locally make up an overwhelming majority. So no matter how you slice it, whether you lower it or come up with some sort of other
It's
system,
disproportionate.
you're still going to be taxing local businesses, and they're just going to pass that on to the consumer.
I have to be honest, when I moved here, I saw those tolls, thought they were car tolls, was very concerned about my Easy Pass. I was very concerned, but it's nice to know they're not on, but perhaps soon.
Well, at least they didn't waste money putting them up because they never came down.
No, you missed a good fight and then there was one. Remember, they wanted to put the toll on the new Secana Bridge.
Yes.
Remember that? Remember that?
Oh, the Secana River Bridge.
Which leads us to bridges. The demolition of the piers takes place as we speak. The contracts have been signed, and that's it, Allison. We'll see
That's
you
it.
when they're ready to cut the ribbon.
2027, right? They're
Yeah.
hoping to have it completed by then.
28.
28,
Yes.
excuse me.
28, which is now 2 years past when the Governor McKee, and DOT Director Alvidi announced
Right.
last year they were hoping to get it done by 2026, and then when they came out and announced the new contract a month ago, it was 2028, and the cost was basically almost double of
And
what
it's
they
going to be an
anticipated.
extra lane.
Yep.
Right, 5 instead of 4.
So if they're going to build it, they're going to accommodate for the future.
New
reportedly.
lights. New lights, I
We will
guess.
say. I go across it all the time. I mean, obviously they need a new bridge, but the traffic seems to have gotten a little bit better, or maybe we're just tolerating it a little bit more. But 2028, huh?
Yeah. Well, listen. Governor's up for re-election. He's running.
Right.
Whoever's running against him, and Narona says he's interested. Sakarchi's the buzz. Helena folks, they're going to hammer him on the bridge.
But his out is, which he's already used,
He
I've been
inherited
handed
it.
a bad bridge.
Right.
I was told, and again, don't forget, they were in the middle of an $80 million repair project when they
Yeah.
discovered the problem that closed the bridge. So
Right.
he'll be told, I was told that this bridge was fixable, and I was handed a bad bridge.
So he's going to say inherited that. But what about Mount Hope? I had an Ask Allison that came in about 6 weeks ago. It was not easy to get that report, I just want to say. And
this
there's
the
not a lot in it other than it's fine for now.
Is this the inspection report?
Yes. The inspection was done a while ago.
And it was in fair condition, just keep using it, and Peter Alvidi insisted safe. By the way, that's the
Oh, that's
Turnpike
right.
and Bridge
I was on the
Authority.
radio with you about that.
Yeah.
Right, but he's on the board.
He's on the board as the DOT director. That's Turnpike and Bridge Authority. And listen, we need a new Secana River Bridge. You got 100 years out of it.
And it's,
Why aren't we?
yeah.
Right. And the other part, to go back to the Washington Bridge, the governor's out as I was handed a bad bridge, but then the comeback is, but then you supposedly botched the response to then closing it down
Right.
and then saying, we hope to have a new bridge in 2026.
Right.
It's going to cost $250 to $300 million. I think a lot of people at the start were like, that doesn't
Doesn't
add up.
right.
And then nobody bid on that proposal because the big bridge companies
Well,
were like,
yeah.
that's not realistic.
And so now we're looking at Mount Hope and others, so it just raises a lot of eyebrows, and people don't necessarily
Listen,
feel safe.
we need
Yeah.
a new Mount Hope Bridge. And although the Romans do pretty good, right? They got like one in Rome, 1,000 years old. And eventually, here's another thing nobody wants to talk about. We need a new prison. Right across the
Well,
street
we
is the old
drive by
Shawshank
this. Oh,
Redemption.
We pass by it
There's a
every
lot
day.
of construction.
Max.
But again,
Yeah.
is there ever going to really be the political will to put a lot of money into a prison.
Well, we've seen what happens when we don't have political will. Things fall, things deteriorate.
Right, but
and
you
fall.
can make
We
the
didn't have
argument to people that I drive
Yeah.
over a bridge every day. Unfortunately, if you're warehousing prisoners, which a lot of people out of sight, out of mind, it's like, why are we going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars? And they're trying to downsize, right? Because they said, minimum? We look, when you say Shawshank, we look at maximum here on Pontiac Avenue.
Yeah.
Abby, have you been to the new soccer stadium?
I haven't. I'm very excited to go. I know you, several of you guys have been. It looks wonderful.
Gene approved.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I've been pretty critical of it on the radio, how it all came about.
Sure, a lot of people.
The governor had to break the tie, the cost, the guarantees. Is soccer gonna take off? Soccer's a dicey thing. It's not that big up in Foxborough.
No, and I would say the problem in Foxborough is you have a 60-something thousand seat stadium. And I think attendance-wise, the Revolution do all right. But if you're sitting there and there's 20,000 people in a 60,000 seat stadium, it looks empty. They've been talking about years for trying to build a new one. The thing, and we were just talking about this in Pawtucket, is you've got to, especially with what we would call minor league, you have to tie into the youth leagues. You give them tickets. You say, come play on the field. You get them invested.
Have you been?
I have not been yet.
Okay, and you've been?
A couple games.
And I've been. Now, when I went, it was only the second game. It worked. It looked great, and everything was working. So I want to credit them for that. Whether this thing is going to be a hit in the end, nobody knows. The fourth quarter hasn't been played yet.
So the last game I went to, it seats 10,000. There were 7,500 in attendance. The kids were on the field. The fireworks, it was the first night of the fireworks. It was spectacular. Listen, it's there. The state is going to want it to succeed, right? Obviously.
All right, when we come back, let's talk Karen Reed. How could we not? This is 10 News Conference. We'll be right back. Welcome back to 10 News Conference, our reporter roundtable. We do this periodically. We're halfway through the year, so we want to recap the stories. All year long, we talk about the homeless and whether or not the state is doing enough, and there were complaints from the advocates who were protesting outside Mayor Smiley's house on Tuesday of this weekend. We don't often see that, but it's not unprecedented. And then they're mad at him for, they say he has a heavy hand when cleaning up the encampments.
Yeah, and this has been something that's been talked about far before even I was here, but I know this has been sticky, and they couldn't get them open when they wanted them to. And this was during wintertime when temperatures were dropping. Yes, the pallet shelters specifically. But yeah, homelessness in Providence is a challenge.
Well, we keep throwing money at it. So.
Well, we throw hundreds of millions of dollars at it, and there's no accounting, and
when you
that's a big part of the story.
And when you go to other cities, I think mayors will forcefully say we're getting rid of encampments because that's what they think.
It's a public safety issue.
An overwhelming majority. It's like the ATVs. It was a sticky wicket. Again, I used that term twice now. It was a sticky problem in Providence, but in Cranston, the mayors have said nope, they're not coming here, and that's the end of it.
By the way, that man with the hat over there, that's Vin Marzullo. He was the interim director of the Da Vinci Center, and about 2 years ago, he was complaining very much about 2 encampments near Da Vinci that had to be cleaned up. The other day, he was out protesting against Mayor Smiley's method. So I'm not sure Vin wants it both ways, but he says I have the best interests of people at heart. So, Allison, this never ends.
It never ends. But the Echo Village is full. There's been complaints about some of the activity that's been going on there. But in general, I mean, it was a success in the end as far as at least getting shelter for people, despite the cost. So you're going to challenge me on the cost.
What do you mean success?
Well, people are getting off the streets and getting some services.
And Dan went up, and Dan
did a walk around.
Did a walk around. The people there were happy.
People were wondering if you're going to spend all this money, and were people actually going to choose to stay there, and they are.
Right.
Because that was the issue, right? There were people, they said, who didn't want to go to shelters.
And they're full.
Yes.
What was the amount in the end we spent?
$4.3 million. That includes the contract to run it.
With Hope.
And again, I reported earlier this year that the construction cost, that part alone had gone up by $1.3 million. That part of it had doubled. They blamed that a lot on the fire issue. They had to put fire suppression systems in each individual unit. I think the construction cost broke down to about $67,000 per building.
So there's the 45. That's a lot.
There's the 45 units plus the office, there's bathroom, showers.
Oh, yeah.
Route 2, Arlington RV. Go buy as many trailers full with amenities and everything.
And that's the argument.
We built back at the shelter.
That was the argument. People said you could roll in RVs, you could do so much for so much less. less, but then the counter was, yeah, but you have to meet the fire code and the fire code. And then Shekarchi came back and said, we've eased the fire code, but that was after this already happened.
Oh, that was
The
months,
fire
yeah.
code with a trailer, we parked them in trailer camps all the time. Yeah,
I want to know if they ever, did they follow that model at all? Did they compare the two? I don't think they ever did.
Well, with this, they applied the hotel code,
the hotel
which is the
code, right.
closest
Which
they
now
can have.
Massachusetts is shutting down all the hotels and no more, so.
All right, let's talk about Karen Reed, because she dominated the first half of the year. In the end, she got off. Were you up covering that?
I was. I never went to Dedham.
Yeah.
That was other reporters with me on the morning on Sunrise, of course. But I followed it closely. It was a very interesting case, and I think seeing it round two, and Katie and you did a lovely job debriefing every day, but it was quite interesting.
Were you surprised at all? I think even people, obviously you hear the most vocal people are the ones who think she was framed and she was innocent, but I think even people who thought that maybe she did hit John O'Keefe and leave him there thought that they weren't surprised with the not guilty verdict because
this was an
they don't
indictment
think
on the
the
police.
state made the case.
I was
On the
not
police
surprised.
investigation.
Here's the thing. You have a commotion on the lawn, police lights blaring, radios blaring, a dead body, people screaming, and the homeowners don't come out.
That's
Nobody goes
odd.
and knocks on their door and says, you better come out.
And they
that was
never
a
went
very
in.
odd part of this story.
The police never went into the house.
Yeah.
The dog, the house.
Right.
There was a lot of things surrounding this that made it a little, and it got a lot of social media grab. A lot of people on TikTok specifically, Instagram were following this and sort of already had their idea and spread that.
We've covered a lot of trials, and I think social media, this is the test case for social media.
Yes.
Well,
I mean,
Turtle
OJ
Boy
is like the last one I could think of with this kind of reaction.
Well, and the thing is,
heard?
Turtle Boy,
Yes.
before, I mean, this case at the beginning made news like a few years ago when it happened,
Right.
but then it was the conspiracy theory and the blogger Turtle Boy who really put that out there and was following people around in Canton, accusing them of being part of the crime. And that's what really gained attention. And I would say after the first trial, which I think was more of a local phenomenon maybe
Yes.
in
I agree
Massachusetts
with
and
that,
Rhode Island,
yeah.
it went national because Karen Reed did all these. She was on Dateline. She was on
All the
2020. She was on
conversation
HBO.
still, who did it?
Well, that's
Everybody is still left with who did it.
Yeah,
right?
What happens now?
But here, this is the thing: the prosecutors have no appetite to go and
No, of course not.
And
How
start
much
all
have they
over again.
spent?
And they
Yeah.
they will still claim there was nobody else. Nobody else they looked at. And I think the most interesting thing when she came out on the courthouse steps after, she said, nobody's been fighting harder for justice for John O'Keefe than I have. Maybe because she claims that they've been doing an investigation
that
and
sat
claims
well with
that-
the family.
I don't think it. Well, they
Obviously.
think she did it, right? So is she
Yeah.
trying to claim that by
Well-
blaming other people that was fighting for justice?
She still has a civil suit.
the move. Yep.
Yes.
Well, okay, very, very key to this.
Yeah.
The family is suing her civilly. That means this whole thing is
And
going
the
to play out
bars.
again with a much lower threshold. We've
Right.
seen that in OJ. Not
Right.
guilty, criminal, guilty civilly. So we'll see.
Right, a much lower threshold.
Right.
You just have to prove. It's like 51%, whereas criminal is
Right.
beyond
Just-
a reasonable doubt.
Just a minute. The next 6 months, what are you looking forward to covering? What are you looking forward to resolving? Anything come to mind?
Well, I kind of want to see how the governor's race shapes up, and we're
Okay.
talking about this early because I think usually, the race is in the fall of 2026. Usually in Rhode Island, it doesn't really kick off until the spring. But with you're talking to Joe Shekarchi,
Yep.
the House Speaker, who's sitting on a ton of money. Is
He's
he going to
jumping
get
in. That's my prediction.
Everything
your
you hear is
prediction, he's in?
everything you hear is he's
Alright.
not going to get in if Dan McKee stays in. Dan McKee got out way early because he, I think, was hoping to keep some people out.
Got to move it. Shekarchi's our guest next week, so stay tuned for
okay.
that. We'll ask him again.
All right.
Next 6 months for you, just quickly. 10
Back
seconds.
to school time is coming,
Oh,
and
that's
seeing
your-
what
that's your world, yes.
seeing what the federal government and all of the cutbacks, perhaps, or the changes, what that's going to look like.
All right. And I'll say, all this stuff over the big, beautiful bill, we're taping midweek. We don't know if it
Representative Almond
passed.
calls it the big ugly bill.
We'll just keep fighting over that, and we'll see what the Medicaid cuts actually come to. In the meantime, that's 10 News Conference, #1 longest running political show. Thanks to the panel for joining us, and thanks for you. And thanks to you, most importantly, for joining us every week on 10 News Conference. I'll see you on the radio next week and on NBC 10 News at 6. Have a great rest of your weekend.
In the time it takes you to actually board that flight from Group 8,
Now boarding Premier Altitude Elite Club members.
you could have bought a Hyundai on Amazon. Yes, that Amazon, where you buy everything else.
Mid-tier Altitude Elite, feel Feel free to board now.
So while you're waiting for them to make up new boarding groups, you can order your dream car and the dealer will have it ready in no time.
Now boarding groups 1 through 7.
Oh, so close. Visit HyundaiUSA.com or call 562-314-4603 for more details. Limited availability, pickup through participating Hyundai dealer in select markets.